You're working on the wrong thing. The opener you rehearsed, the conversation topic you planned, the way you worded your first line. None of it matters as much as you think, because by the time you open your mouth, by the time you say a single word, she's already formed an impression of you, not consciously, not deliberately, but decisively. And here's the uncomfortable part. She can't explain how she did it. She just knows. This video is about what happened in those first few seconds. The signals you're sending before you speak, the language your body is already broadcasting, whether you intend it or not, and more importantly, how to change it. There's a reason some men walk into a room and something shifts, not because they're louder, not because they're better looking, not because they said something clever. Something in the room adjusts to them before anyone could even tell you why. I spent a long time thinking that was charisma, some genetic gift, something you either had or didn't. Then I started reading the people who had actually studied this systematically. Robert Greene, the Stoic philosophers, the behavioral researchers who came after them, and one thing became very clear. This quality, whatever it is, follows rules. Specific, learnable, repeatable rules that have nothing to do with what you say. They have everything to do with what you are when no one's asking you to perform. Here's what I'm going to show you in the next 15 minutes. 5 silent signals that determine how you're perceived before you speak. The philosophy behind each one, because understanding the why is the only thing that makes the how stick. And at the end, the one practice that ties all 5 together in a way that makes them permanent rather than performed. The 5th signal is the one most men never discover. It's also the one that makes the other 4 either work or fail. I'll get there, but the signals build on each other, so don't skip ahead. Let's start with the one that's happening right now, whether you know it or not. Picture 2 men standing at the edge of the same social gathering. Man A has his phone in his hand. Not using it, just holding it. His weight shifts every 30 seconds. His eyes make small, quick scans of the room. He adjusts his position when someone walks near him. Man B has nothing in his hands. His weight is settled. His eyes move slowly, resting on whatever genuinely interests him. He doesn't adjust when someone passes. He stays exactly where he is. No words, no interaction yet. But something is already different about how these 2 men register. Schopenhauer wrote that the undisciplined will cannot be still. It is always reaching, always grasping, always generating motion in service of its hunger. And every small, unnecessary movement a man makes in public is that hunger made visible. The fidgeting, the phone checking, the constant small adjustments. They all say the same thing. I'm not comfortable just being here. And that discomfort broadcasts before a single word is spoken. The still man communicates the opposite, not through anything he does, through what he refrains from doing. He signals that he doesn't need the room to give him anything to feel okay. That signal is rare, and rare things get noticed. Why this is harder than it sounds right now, wherever you are, try to go completely still for 30 seconds. You'll notice something immediately. Your body will start generating impulses. An itch, a shift, the urge to check something. These aren't random. Freud called this leakage, the unconscious expressing itself through physical movement when the conscious mind isn't looking. Every time you obey that impulse in public, it's visible. The practice is simple. Every morning, before you pick up your phone, before you speak to anyone, sit completely still for 10 minutes. Not meditating, not breathing intentionally, just still. Your body will fight it. That fight is exactly what you're training. Each time you hold stillness, you're teaching your nervous system that it doesn't get to run you, that you decide when you move. That shift, from reactive to chosen, is the foundation everything else is built on. But stillness without the right gaze just looks vacant. Signal 2 is where still becomes powerful. The eyes are the only part of the nervous system visible from outside the body. Think about what that means. When someone looks into your eyes, they're not seeing a surface. They're seeing your actual neurological state, your fear, your confidence, your need, your steadiness, all of it, before you've said a word. Robert Greene studied the great historical figures who commanded rooms and found they all shared one trait: a gaze that assessed rather than sought, eyes that moved slowly, resting on what genuinely interested them, without urgency or hunger. Here's the distinction that matters. Most men look at a woman they find attractive with wanting eyes. Their gaze widens slightly, locks on, stays too long. It signals need. It makes her the subject and him the observer. And being observed by someone who clearly needs something from you creates one instinct: distance. The alternative isn't cold indifference. It's what Nietzsche described as the surveying gaze, the quality of looking at the world the way someone looks at something that belongs to them, not possessively, proprietarily, like a man who is comfortable in his own dominion. This gaze doesn't reveal desire. It assesses, and being assessed, rather than worshipped, creates a completely different dynamic. It reverses the frame. Suddenly she's the one wondering whether she's interesting enough to hold your attention. Once a day, find a mirror and hold your own gaze for 5 minutes. No breaking, no adjusting, just meeting yourself. Most men can't do 30 seconds. They look away. Not because they're vain, because genuine self-confrontation is uncomfortable. There's a flinch that happens. The man who can hold his own gaze without flinching can hold anyone else's without flinching. That unbroken gaze communicates, at a level below language, that you have nothing to hide and nothing to fear. And that combination is something most people encounter rarely enough that when they do, they don't forget it. You can have stillness and the right gaze and still broadcast low value. Signal 3 is the one most men have been actively trained against since childhood. Every animal understands territory. We just forgot we're animals. Watch any child before the world teaches him to minimize. He sprawls, he reaches, he treats every room as his. Then slowly, through years of being told to sit still, take less room, make space for others, he compresses himself. By adulthood, most men occupy the minimum space required to exist. They stand with weight on one foot, ready to move if someone more important needs their spot. They sit with limbs tucked in. And Greene observed, space is power made visible. When you compress yourself, you communicate, before speaking, before any interaction, that you believe you deserve only this much, this small portion, this corner. Women register this compression the way they register everything else pre-consciously. They couldn't tell you why the man against the wall seems less interesting than the man who chose the center of the room, but their nervous system filed it. Small space. Small man. The correction isn't arrogance, it's reclamation. It's undoing the training that taught you to apologize for existing. There's a related principle Greene documented across dozens of historical accounts of genuine attraction. The most magnetically interesting people didn't stay at one distance. They used what he called the approach-withdraw pattern. Move slightly closer when the conversation earns it. Pull back before she expects you to stay. This creates something specific, a mild, persistent uncertainty. And Freud's research showed that the brain doesn't distinguish well between types of arousal. Uncertainty, excitement, and attraction produce nearly identical physiological responses. The man who approaches and stays becomes furniture, ignored the way you ignore temperature. The man who approaches and withdraws becomes something worth paying attention to, because his presence isn't guaranteed, and we only value what we aren't certain we'll keep. Music is not made of notes, it's made of the silence between notes. The pause before the crescendo is what creates the crescendo. Without it, there's just noise. Human interaction works exactly the same way. What you don't say lands harder than what you do. The space you leave empty is where attention grows. Robert Greene called this the art of absence. He found it in every historical figure who created genuine obsession. They weren't always present. They didn't always respond. They left gaps. And gaps, the human mind cannot help but fill. Freud documented the compulsion to complete. An unresolved tension demands resolution. An unfinished sentence insists on being finished. When you leave gaps in your communication, when you end a conversation before its natural conclusion, when you pause longer than feels comfortable, her mind doesn't stop. It keeps going. It fills the space you left with thought about you. And whatever she creates in that imagination, more powerful than anything you could have said. Here's the counterintuitive insight that most men never get. You create more attraction through what you withhold than through what you give. The man who answers every question completely, who keeps every conversation going until the energy dies, who texts back in 60 seconds every time, he leaves nothing to wonder about. He's fully illuminated. There's no shadow. And what has no shadow has no mystery, and what has no mystery creates no fascination. The man who speaks less than feels natural, who lets silences extend past comfort, who ends conversations at the peak rather than the fade. That man becomes an open question she keeps turning over. That open question is where desire lives. These 4 signals work, but without the 5th, they're techniques, and techniques crack under pressure. Signal 5 is what makes the others real rather than performed. Here's the problem with everything I've told you so far. You can practice stillness, you can develop the gaze, you can reclaim space and master silence, and you can still fail, because she'll feel the gap between what you're performing and what you actually are. Women read that gap the way they read everything else, pre-consciously, accurately, without being able to explain it. Schopenhauer wrote about men who live entirely from the outside in, who measure their worth by external responses, who exist as reflections in other people's eyes rather than as people with genuine interior lives. This outward-facing existence is the source of every signal problem we've discussed. The man who fidgets. He's managing how he's perceived. The man with hungry eyes. He needs something from her. The man who compresses. He's apologizing for taking space. The man who fills silence. He's afraid of what it will reveal. Every broken signal traces back to the same root, a man whose sense of worth is located outside himself. Sovereignty is moving that location inward. Marcus Aurelius wrote about being like a rocky promontory against which waves crash endlessly. The waves come, the waves go, the rock remains. Not because the rock is performing stability, because it is stable. That's what sovereignty looks like in practice. Not a man who pretends to be unaffected. A man who has genuinely done enough internal work that his mood isn't determined by whether she texted back. His confidence isn't contingent on her interest. His sense of value doesn't require her participation. Epictetus, who was born enslaved, who had everything external stripped from him, built his entire philosophy on one insight. The only thing genuinely within your control is your own response to the world. When you absorb that fully, the grip on outcomes loosens. And the loosening of that grip is exactly what the other 4 signals naturally start to express. The stillness becomes real, because you're not managing a performance. The gaze steadies, because there's nothing to hide. The space expands, because you're not apologizing. The silence becomes powerful, because you're not afraid of it. Jung called this individuation, the slow process of becoming a complete self. He was clear that it wasn't a weekend project, it was the work of years. But every step on the path produces results. You don't have to finish the journey to benefit from walking it. For stillness, 10 minutes of motionless silence every morning before you engage with the world. For the gaze, 5 minutes holding your eyes in a mirror every day, no flinching. For space, Once daily, consciously occupy more physical space than feels natural. Plant yourself in the center, not the edges. For silence, 1 hour each day where you speak only when genuinely necessary. Let the discomfort of quiet become familiar. For sovereignty, each night review where you gave your peace to an external outcome. Name it, and consciously choose to hold it less tightly. None of these are dramatic. All of them compound, 5 signals, 1 root. Stillness, the body that doesn't betray its hunger. The gaze, eyes that assess rather than seek. Space, the man who doesn't apologize for existing. Silence, the negative space where her curiosity grows. Sovereignty, the internal foundation that makes the other 4 real. The mistake most men make is treating these as techniques to layer on top of who they currently are. They don't work that way. They're not a costume. They're expressions of an internal state. And the internal state is what actually needs building. That's the slow work, the unglamorous work. The work that produces something that doesn't crack under pressure because it was never performance in the first place. Nietzsche wrote, "Become who you are. Not who earns the most approval, who you actually are underneath everything you've learned to perform." These 5 signals are just the beginning of how that internal transformation becomes visible to the world around you. There's a deeper question underneath all of this that I haven't answered yet. Why do some men who develop all 5 of these signals still attract the wrong dynamics? Why does the outer change sometimes outpace the inner one? And what happens when it does? That answer lives in the next video, and it's the one that connects everything. It's on your screen right now.